to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's another session for the Regional Mapping Initiatives. And this is the sixth technical session of our Map the Gap Symposium 2021 Redux. To start with, we'd like to invite the president of TCARTA, Mr. Kyle Goodrich. He's going to present about the scalable satellite-derived bathymetry technology for regional mapping projects. Kyle, you can share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, you can see my screen just to confirm. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to be invited to speak here. I'm Kyle Goodrich, the president and founder of TCARTA. I'm going to speak on scalable satellite-derived bathymetry technology, there's regional mapping projects. And I actually recorded a presentation because it's a little bit late at night over here, and been on several different conferences all day long, one in the Caribbean, one in Alaska, and obviously this one based in Nairobi time. And so I just recorded my presentation. So I'm just going to push play. And TCARTA is an independently owned small business based in Denver, Colorado, with affiliate companies and offices in Kingston, Jamaica, and London, England. We specialize in satellite-derived bathymetry, space-based hydrospatial analysis, global marine data products. And we have an extensive history of first and largest satellite-derived bathymetry projects with various US and international hydrographic offices. Our current small business technology and research grants are focused on the scalability, extensibility, and accuracy of satellite-derived bathymetry. And you may have seen some of the recent press articles. In our recent past with hydrographic offices, we've had a focus on regional scope projects. I'm going to speak briefly to two past projects and two more recent projects that demonstrate the potential of satellite-derived bathymetry for regional mapping projects. Rolling the tape back to our work in the Pacific region early 2019. One of our first truly ambitious projects, TCARTA produced 2-meter resolution satellite-derived bathymetry using 87 world view images, using a radiative transfer method and a stereophotogrammetric method to validate the results, producing satellite-derived bathymetry over 36 islands and atolls. Our partnership with Digital Globe, now Maxar Technologies, was instrumental in a successful project, collecting over 400 images for the project. As you're likely aware, the Republic of Kiribati is a low-lying, remote island nation spread across approximately 3,000 nautical miles in the Pacific and highly vulnerable to sea level rise. These data provide a much-needed and modern baseline bathymetric and habitat survey of one of the most remote countries in the world. One of the benefits of operating space is lack of friction and ease of moving the sensor over the planet and imaging the area repeatedly. Add in a precise multispectral camera and precision positioning, and you get a pretty good instrument for calculating water depths. Many of these islands hadn't been surveyed since the mid-1800s, and it was challenging to get to that location then, and it's still challenging to mobilize those locations now. Deployment of aircraft or ships to these locations would be incredibly time-consuming, costly, and burn considerable fossil fuels. Even collecting a few lead lines at the entrances of the lagoons with a sextant for positioning, I imagine, was not trivial, so you can see why most of these areas were left blank. 150 years later, and with a satellite's view, nearly every 2-meter pixel has a depth calculated. The bathymetric baseline was updated from sparse, old, and no data to a continuous, modern, 3-dimensional digital data set of an island of the Pacific, providing us suitable information for environmental and coastal modeling, survey planning, and coastal defense engineering. And through the Commonwealth Marine Economy Program, all of these data have been contributed to the Seabed 2330 program. Shifting closer to home in the United States and in regions of shifting sandy and unconsolidated seafloors, satellite-derived bathymetry technology offers advantages of rapid and repeated imagery collection to provide the most up-to-date information where the seafloor is constantly changing. Of course, these areas also come with challenges of strong currents, suspended sediments, and turbidity, all of which make for challenging conditions for satellite-derived bathymetry, which relies on optically clear water to produce the most accurate results. This scope of work required imagery to be less than 6 months old to account for shifting sandy seafloors. There was no imagery available in the archives that met this criteria, so we needed to task the satellites. In highly dynamic locations with turbidity, tasking of satellite imagery requires careful planning around a variety of atmospheric and met ocean conditions, as well as satellite capacity and demand. In this case, working closely with Maxar Technologies, we collected 55 images in the summer of 2020, which proved to be a challenging year for imaging the seafloor in the region. It is not uncommon for us to reject up to 90% of images collected due to environmental related image defects. Needless to say, it was a hot, hazy summer on the Cape Cod, and the water was seldom clear. It certainly takes more than luck to produce satellite-derived bathymetry at regional scales in dynamic areas such as this. And this is what drives a lot of our grants and research and development to operationalize satellite-derived bathymetry in challenging locations. Our biggest and most ambitious research program, a National Science Foundation Small Business Innovation Research Grant, now coming to the conclusion of a 3-year Phase 1 and Phase 2 research program in commercialization phase. Under this program, TCARTA has developed a cloud-based, multi-sensor, multi-algorithm satellite-derived bathymetry approach to enhance the accuracy and viability of satellite-derived bathymetry, expand the geographical applicability and scalability of these technologies. The goal was to create an ever-improving space-based littoral bathymetric surveying capability, adaptable to any multispectral satellite imagery source, and combine the benefits of the 5-day repeat cycle of the Sentinel-2 A and B multispectral satellite system with the precise depth measured using the space-based laser altimeter, the ISAT-2 satellite.
The ISAT-2 satellite is a regional mapping effort into itself and a rather exciting instrument to have in space. TCARTA saw the power of ISAT-2 to facilitate the scalability of satellite-derived bathymetry, but since this data was not readily accessible as a data product, it had to be extracted from the raw photon data. After producing a manual extraction software program, we then used that information to train a deep learning model so that we could extract ISAT-2 depth points globally and at scale. And here you can see the results of being able to extract out ISAT-2 data in great volumes. We're able to deploy this across broad areas to validate satellite-derived bathymetry surfaces that are produced from multispectral imagery, where we composited all this information and then we're able to validate it using the secondary sensor. So it's quite a powerful tool to expand the capabilities and produce broad areas. There's also a lot of other technologies in the background here between cloud computation and the Monte Carlo scenarios around producing and are processing all algorithms and various parameters and settings to produce the best available scenarios, as well as capabilities to blend data from different data sources, so in different resolutions. So the system that we've designed is so created so we can create regional mapping products from multiple sensors into a seamless elevation product. So now I'm just going to briefly speak to 2 recent demonstration projects where we've put these technologies to work in 2 sites in the Maldives and in Jamaica. So the first demonstration of these technologies that I'm going to speak to is a project that we completed this past summer where the Seabed 2030 program offered TCARTA the opportunity to demonstrate these technologies and contribute the resulting data to the Seabed 2030 effort. We were given full range and kind of the scope of what we were going to produce, how large of an area, what sensor we were going to use, so long as the area was in the Maldives. And this was agreeable to us because the Maldives is a lovely place to do satellite-derived bathymetry. So we found this site in Holmahito where we chose to demonstrate the effectiveness of satellite-derived bathymetry in an area where it had been surveyed in about 100 years, and there's been a fair bit of coastal change and coastal engineering, and there's freely available satellite imagery that could update the bathymetry in the area. So an approved coastal model from satellite-derived bathymetry in this area we also thought would be useful for onward hydrodynamic modeling, for example, as well as potentially updating the charts in this area. So this was a good site to kind of demonstrate a multi-use of satellite-derived bathymetry. To give you a sense of this location, it is a rather suitable location for satellite-derived bathymetry, but there's still environmental considerations to take into account like any other location. The clear, calm waters of the Maldives are highly suitable for satellite-derived bathymetry, though the outer ring of the atoll is exposed to the open ocean, which creates wavy conditions and whitewash along the reef edge and beaches, which detracts from the ability to calculate water depths through those whitewash, as well as equatorial regions and the solar glare or glint off the water surface detracts from the ability to produce satellite-derived bathymetry. But overall, this location is quite suitable, and just be a matter of finding the best images with low cloud cover to composite. The benefits of satellite programs that collect imagery over the same location on a regular cadence is that we can combine images over the same location into image composites. This is a kind of a relatively new technique for the satellite-derived bathymetry community. Previously, you would go through an archive and select one or two ideal images or best images to process. Now with cloud computation and advanced computing, we can combine images on a pixel level, creating image composites that you see down here in the lower right, where all of the negative impacts of any one image kind of get averaged out, and you get a very clear image of the seafloor, which is perfect for calculating satellite-derived bathymetry depths. Now, once we've done all that imagery preparation, ISAT processing, and compositing the imagery, it's actually just about as equally easy and efficient to process the entire atoll or the entire image. So once we processed 3.2 square kilometers, we thought we'd expand it to the entire atoll of Adu City, so providing up to 70 square kilometers to the Maldivian government, and the Seabed 2030 program would be a nice demonstration and larger than we initially planned. But still, it seems a bit small based on when I talk about how scalable satellite-derived bathymetry is. So since the scope of the project was left up to us, we zoomed out a bit more and decided to process a quadrant of four Sentinel-2 tiles. So now we see a kind of a broader area, not just the atoll of Adu City, the atoll to the north. It's looking a bit more like a demonstration of scalable technologies evolved. So we're processing 139 images and able to refine the model considerably, because now we have 40,000 ISAT-2 depths to form the model. And now we're producing up to a little over 500 square kilometers of 10-meter satellite-derived bathymetry for the Seabed 2030 program. But to us at TCARTA, this still didn't quite look like a proper demonstration of the state of TCARTA SDB. It was kind of hard to see this on a map when we zoomed out of the Indian Ocean at a regional scale. Again, once you've established the imagery acquisition and processing parameters, establish a well-trained model, you might as well keep going. Zooming out a bit more, we're taking a look at the whole country of the Maldives. Left up to TCARTA to determine the scope of this demonstration project, we decided to push the limits, spin up a few extra CPUs and solid-state drives, and produce satellite-derived bathymetry for the whole country. Now we're seeing the scalability of satellite-derived bathymetry, cloud computing, machine learning, and high-powered computing can do. We're no longer looking at a postage stamp or Adu City atoll. We're now demonstrating this data across an entire region and are actually able to see the extent of this data from space. In the end, we used over 509 images processed and produced a million ISAT-2 points and provided 4,200 square kilometers of 10-meter resolution satellite-derived bathymetry, all in less of 2 months of production time. Now, it's also worthy to note that all of this data and images were collected for other purposes and were sitting on data archives and really just needed to be processed. And so I may have made this look all a little too easy, and it's worth remembering that this 2-month production time was at the tail end of 3 years of accelerated research and development and nearly a decade of TCARTA's satellite-derived bathymetry data products. So there's a lot behind the scenes here, but this ended up providing a lovely test bed for our scalable technologies and where the grant-funded data products are headed. The second demonstration is when we can combine technologies using a single beam survey and satellite-derived bathymetry. And in a demonstration project we did in partnership with the National Land Agency of Jamaica in the Bowdoin Harbor area of Jamaica. TCARTA first produced a reconnaissance-level satellite-derived bathymetry surface for survey planning and risk reduction. Following the National Land Agency's single beam survey, a second surface was produced using the single beam depths to train a satellite-derived bathymetry model to improve the accuracy. Satellite-derived bathymetry as a reconnaissance tool to reduce operational risk, improve efficiency, and to infill gaps to shore in monitoring combination technologies.
Oops, I guess I... Yeah.
Now zooming out once again, we can see where Bowdoin Harbor lies within the larger Jamaica region, and we can combine the single beam survey information with further ISAT-2 depth points to train a satellite-derived bathymetry calculation model to produce bathymetry across the entire country quite effectively and efficiently. Now I can't say this is a perfect model, and there's still it's kind of a draft satellite-derived bathymetry version here, but this kind of demonstrates how quickly you can combine these two technologies between a marine survey and satellite-derived bathymetry to quickly map large regions. So, and with that, I'd like to thank the Map the Gap Symposium for the invitation to present TCARTA's technologies and our scalable satellite-derived bathymetry capabilities and how they've been deployed around the world for various mapping initiatives. We've posted a few bits of resources on a dedicated web page on our website where you can see some videos of our technologies and some other resources, and I encourage you to go there. So thank you very much again, and I appreciate your time, and please contact me if you have any questions or want to talk satellite-derived bathymetry anywhere in the world.
All right, thank you very much.
Kyle. Thank you. Yeah. So Robin said something. Beautiful SDB in Maldives. Yes, Maldives is beautiful too.
It sure is.
To move on, our second speaker for today is the director of the National Seabed Mapping Section of the Geoscience Australia, Ms. Kim Picard. Ms. Kim Picard will provide us an update on AusSeabed and how it's moving forward. Kim?
Thank you, Haya. It's a pleasure to be here today. I will actually expand that a little bit. I'm not going to focus just on AusSeabed, even though that's what is on top of the logo there, but I'm going to speak on behalf of the Australian community. It's a large community, and we're working really well together. And so I think it's worth to highlight all of it. Just recently, we published this study on the Australian seabed economic value to Australia. As we were expecting, the contribution is quite large. We're looking at about 16 billion of value added to this, and about 50,000 FTE straight from that value added. And of course, there's a lot of indirect that bumps the value to 48 billion. So the sectors are here on the right with defense, tourism, water, transport, and we're all very familiar. So those are with those sectors and how we can contribute to them. But that is actually confirming what we thought of value we create by mapping the seabed. So what's seabed? Just quickly, it's a fabulous community. It brings everyone together from Australia. And we work towards mapping and creating accessible the Australian seabed. We've got 4 main strategic goals. Going around delivering the seabed data, demonstrating the value, coordinating the effort. We don't want to duplicate any effort, whether it's about finding data or getting new data, and improving standard of seabed mapping for data collection or processing and all. As I mentioned, it's a big community with government, academia, industry, and that extend to many players from New Zealand as well. We're very close-knit here. So this presentation will expand, will not be just AusSeabed, as I mentioned. We'll talk about the data that's available on the portal, talk about the collection of data by the community, new data infrastructure. We all know it takes a fair bit of infrastructure to push data out. New tools and guidelines that we have published and where we're at the progress of the last year. And then also stakeholder engagement. We're really close to the community and do a fair bit, and this is why we're here as well. So if you go to the AusSeabed data portal and the website, you can find a lot of the data. Whatever we have available is there. But in the past year, we have updated or created or published new compilations. When I say compilation, we're talking about sometimes just an amalgamation of multi-beam data into just one set, or more of an interpolated product that's got all sorts of bathymetry information. And as you can see in these big square, it'd be one of our most downloaded data set is the Great Barrier Reef that has been put together by GA and James Cook University. In terms of survey, you can also access high resolution per survey. This is the way, it's one of the principle we have adopted here, is we're really going survey by survey. We want to make sure that every piece of the puzzle is complete and done to standard so that we can create the maps that we want in the future. And so this past year, we have released over 2 million square kilometers of data. That is about 61 new surveys from 14 different contributors. And also what's amazing is there's a lot of download coming out of the website, and we've got over 20,000 or so just in the past year. Again, if you go to the website, you'll see this great index map. This index map shows where we know about the data. In dark purple is where the data is available either through the OCVED portal or through another portal. Our idea is to consolidate all this going forward into one place, but it's also really important that we help you find where it could be in the meantime. So there's a large amount of data here and everywhere around Australia. You can see this map shows even stuff out into south of Africa. And but you can contact some of the data holder to see if you can get the data a bit faster. But the point here is we are really trying to consolidate and make that all available. And some of it, as you know, will be on the IHOTCPP as well. So it might point you to that. So in terms of data collection, there are multiple players in the field here that are coming together again to release and collect and map the gaps. And so I will start with the HIP program, or the Hydro Scheme Industry Partnership Program from the Australian Hydrographic Office. It's absolutely a fabulous program. It is national. It is meant to map the whole of the Australian marine jurisdiction over a long period of time, probably 2050 and beyond. And so they've been really active and they're ramping up right now. You can go on the website. We're working really closely from an OCVED perspective to release the data. Every year they have a Hydro scheme, which is based on the priorities for mapping based on a risk assessment tool, thanks to our New Zealand colleagues who that was inspired from. And yeah, you can go online and see all of the great progress. It's a really tight partnership with industry, and the data is absolutely beautiful, as you can see on those images. So this is the spread of where they have been. So it's really going all over, and you'll see, I'll show you just a bit later what's coming up. We also have the Marine National Facility that goes out. It's more of a research program, research where voyage expeditioner or research scientists put voyage together and proposal and then get accepted, and then they go out. They're mapping all the time. It can be multi-purpose, oceanographic mission, or any one research expedition. And so all of this, we're working with the CSRO and the Marine National Facility, so you can find all this data online. They're the Grey Star right now that they've done in the past year, and that data becomes available on the OCVED portal. We've got state agencies that are definitely not quiet. Also, like the New South Wales government, if you look in New South Wales is where Sydney is, this coast here, they've done a huge amount of a great LiDAR campaign. They've got 80 kilometres of that coastline fully mapped. It's actually the most downloaded product. So coastal areas obviously is a hot area for data, and they're also creating all these habitat maps. It's pretty a fantastic program they have there. That goes, I don't want to isolate any of the other states. There's other states, Victoria is really active, Western Australia, so there's work everywhere. We've got like James Cook University, you will have heard on one of the night about crowdsourced bathymetry. Dr. Rob Beeman's really active in that space, and he keeps spitting out these boats to get more data out of the Great Barrier Reef area, which is really exciting. And it's been really active too in getting all these ships coming through, like the Schmidt, or there's a new one coming at the Caledon is going to be out and collecting more data. I'll say this a bit later too. And we have a newbie in the place here is if you go out of Perth on the west side, it's called the Minderoo Foundation UWA Deep Sea Research Centre. And that is funded partly by those the two groups here, and they're going to be really focused into the deep sea, mapping the deep ocean. And so we can expect a lot, deep ocean, and by this I mean actually the Indian Ocean. And finally, I think we talked about that last year, but not to repeat, all the data from the Schmidt Ocean Institute, they finished their survey this year and left Australia, but they surveyed a lot of areas around Australia, and that's all available online on the portal too. So there's a lot more. I just can't just give you a quick preview. In terms of seabed infrastructure, again, consolidating and pushing data out is a continuous effort. It's going to take a little bit of time. We've established a publication schedule. We work with data provider or hubs that are connecting, like the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organization, to publish their data. So they give you a bit of an update on what you can expect when to come out. We've moved to the cloud, like many of you, to optimize the infrastructure, and then moving forward. So a lot of things are in a better space now for contributing and being connected. And as I said, we're going to connect more and more what we call hubs, or they manage their own data and then just connect, and then you can see it all. So seabed is doing also a bit of dabbling in, not actually creating some tools and functionalities to make data management easier or data collection, improving the standard of what's being collected. One of our latest quacks, actually, if you're in an hour at the next session, you can hear about that quality assurance tool from Lachlan Hurst. In terms of guidelines, this is not new. We're now going on to our third version. It's been downloaded a fair bit of time, and so it's inspired from the one we see, but catered for our area. The one that I will look forward to present to you next year will be about this project we got funded. It's called GMRT, which you'll be familiar with in this space. But we've combined our effort between GMRT and the Lamont Doherty and seabed to create a platform that will take all of those survey area and be able to create these compilation. It's a really exciting field right now. We didn't think that we would move as fast as we're moving in terms of how to manage this amount of data and querying it in different ways. So I look forward to talk to you more. It'll be delivered by mid-June. We have a coordination tool where we can show what are the upcoming surveys, if any of the players that are out there, users who need areas surveyed, they can provide a request to the HIP to be considered by the HIP program. And as mentioned, upcoming surveys. So you see the little orange one is the one that's coming up soon by the Caledon. And finally, we're updating what we call our national priority areas, but we are recalling this the national areas of interest. So all of the players and the users around Australia, we're expanding that from government to academia, industry, putting where do they want data collected around Australia, so it can help guide every entity who collects data to really target areas. So what can you expect in terms of data this year? By the end of, for us, our year finished in July 2022. You're going to get all of data in all of those areas published. Most of those are either historical or new data, multi-beam data. But also we've got a great project with the University of Western Australia where we're going to release bathymetry data from 3D seismic. In terms of future, more technology and platform, it's great. I mentioned how James Cook University and Rob Beeman are working in fitting out crowdsourced vessel. So there's two more. I forgot there's another one. There's this great lady, Lisa Blair, who's going to go around Antarctica on the 60th parallel. And then we fitted her with seabed 2030 with a recorder for depth. So that will be it's another crowdsource that came from here. We have this great icebreaker that just joined, just arrived in Australia. It's the new operational vessel to go out to Antarctica, and but it's fully fitted with a mapping system. So we're definitely going to be publishing all of the data that comes out of that. Been working with some industry to provide new hydrographic surveyor training in the region. And also there's some new technology development that's coming up with the new Center for Antarctic and Southern Ocean Technology. You can see that's a great image because you see in the same port there the UNA, and you see the investigator there as well, or big national capability. In terms of data to be collected, as mentioned, the Australian Hydrographic Office is going to be really active in next year. So those are all the HIP little tag. There's going to be some state government LiDAR data collection, and some of the great partnership between academia and philanthropy here into the GBR. So it's quite active. Oh, not to forget, people are going to Antarctica, and there's some nice data being collected out there as well. And then the Marine National Facility is planning on more surveys as well. We just don't know exactly where they land. So this is what I had to say. I would really like to invite you to go to the AusSeabed website and look at our last year annual report. I think the community did fabulously. We're kicking some goals here, and it's a very exciting space. I'm always super inspired to be working with the Australian and international communities such as yourself. So it's what keeps us going, a bit of passion and the right people. And we definitely have this community. And then the work plan for next year. So thanks again for listening, and yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us.
Cool. Thank you very much, Kim. Yeah, and I posted the link to the website for AusSeabed. Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of data coming in. It's like it's good for us. Yeah, so we should move on. Our third speaker, unfortunately, he's on board the vessel that Kim was talking about, the DSSB pressure drop, and he's heading. They're doing some dives, and I think they're heading to Kermadec. They'll be in Auckland on the 16th of December. He's not here, but he sent us a video, and I'm going to share that in a moment.
Hi, I'm Victor Vescovo, and I'm here on board my research vessel, the DSSB pressure drop. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there at the conference. We're currently on expedition for 6 weeks in the South Pacific, doing a lot of mapping and some diving in a few weeks. But I just wanted to welcome you all and thank you for all the great efforts that everyone is doing to map the gaps. And as I'm sure all of you know, of course, that 70% of our world is ocean, and of that, only 80% is actually really explored or even mapped. So if you really think about it, more than half of the entire world is not even mapped. And that's a big part of what you all are doing, is helping us as modern explorers to map the seafloor and actually bring knowledge to the world that hasn't existed before. And we do know a lot about other planets, but we still don't know everything there is to know about our own. And so I think it's great that everyone's contributing so much to map the gaps. I just want to show a couple of slides just to give an example of what we're doing here on the pressure drop and how many of the people, some of whom are in the audience, have helped us accomplish our objectives. So just as an example, I'll share my screen here. You can see here just a typical example of the broad swath that we're able to map with our Kongsberg EM124 sonar. And this is from the North Pacific. And this is area that was previously completely unexplored. And here you can see us mapping different basins, seamounts, ridges, and all these other things that the scientists among us can actually use to help understand plate tectonics, volcanism, and any number of other disciplines that we're all interested in. Can also advance it. There's another brilliant example of when we went down to the South Sandwich Trench in the Southern Ocean, just showing the difference between looking at the world using gravimetric methodologies to map, which is the blurry area, and then the swath that we were able to map with the 124 down there in the South Sandwich Trench, just showing the incredible relief and detail that we're able to get with our sonar systems. again, that is only enabled by the incredible training and skills of the people that are in the room watching this. This is another example of some of the things that we have done with the sonar system that is essential, and this is for diving. This is actually the Challenger Deep. And before we actually do any of our ultra deep dives that has become our specialty, we will get a three-dimensional model of where we're going to go. And that yellow dot is what we believe to be the very deepest point in the entire ocean, which is where we targeted our submersible to go down. And you can see the steep walls on either side and the little depressions that basically allowed us to go and investigate some rock outcropping, some of which had bacterial mats on them. And just recently, we were able to bring up a rock with a bacterial mat from a subduction zone for the first time ever. So that was very exciting. But the sonar systems are essential for us to create the maps with which we actually execute our dives. And here's another example in the Tonga Trench. We made one dive during the 5 Deeps expedition down to the bottom of that trench, and you can see how we had a detailed three-dimensional map that allowed us to identify where we were going to position 2 full ocean depth landers, which we nicknamed SCAT and FLOSS, and then where we were going to dive the submersible, and then the route that we were going to take. And you can see on the right-hand side there, we wanted to go on this very high outcropping of rock, almost a vertical wall that would have different types of life forms, different geological strata that we could investigate. So the sonar team on board our ship is absolutely essential for us, not just mapping, but actually helping us plan our dives so that they will be most fruitful from a scientific perspective. Some other things we're doing right now, we're in the South Pacific. We're off the coast of New Britain. And as you can see from the yellow line, we actually came up from Guam and did some significant mapping of the Melanesian Trench. We've now completed multiple circuits of the New Britain Trench to map it with, we believe, the highest resolution that it's ever been mapped. And then we're going down to Cairns, Australia to pick up the submersible that's been under refit for a couple of months. And then we're going to proceed to the San Cristobal, the Santa Cruz, the New Hebrides, and even the Kermadec Trench, and hoping to dive all of them for the first time with a crewed submersible. So that'll be very exciting from a scientific standpoint. But again, our mappers are absolutely essential for helping us identify where we should dive, and not just to get to the deepest point and do some additional mapping, but also from a scientific standpoint, where would be the best place for us to go. And finally, there's this slide. This has gotten to be old hat for us, where it seems that about 95% of the time when we go to a deep ocean trench area and map it with our EM124, with our brilliant technicians on board, we have had to move where the deepest point in these trenches actually is. And in the case of the New Britain Trench, the JEBCO database had 2 potential candidates for the deepest point, as you can see in yellow, numbers 1 and 2. But it turns out through multiple passes that the deepest point is actually where the red dot is. And it's actually 8,955 meters deep, not 9,101. And so there's always something new to discover. There are a lot of things that need to be updated in the worldwide marine database in terms of the big features that are out there. And we're just trying to go about our business and updating all that information as we can with our great systems. So anyway, I will stop sharing my screen here. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you all for all the wonderful work that you are all doing, all the training that you've all been undertaking through your careers. And it's absolutely essential for us to understanding our oceans, and all of you being the modern day Magellans, in many respects, helping us map the last great unexplored frontier of this planet. So thank you all. Have a great conference. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but best to you all. Take care.
Okay, I'm going to move on with our fourth speaker. Our fourth speaker is the manager hydrographic survey of Toitu Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand, and he'll talk about mapping remote locations and using satellite lasers and sonars as part of the Pacific Regional Navigation Initiative. Let's call Stuart. Yep, the floor is yours.
Kia ora, thank you, Haya, and hello to everybody. As Haya said, my name is Stuart Kai, Manager of Hydrographic Survey at the Toitu Te Whenua LIN. So the focus of this presentation is is on a project that we started back in 2015 in partnership with New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Pacific Community, or SPC. And in particular, it will focus on the multi-sensor approach taken to map remote locations using satellite-derived bathymetry, airborne laser bathymetry, and then finally multi-beam echo sounders. So the Pacific Regional Navigation Initiative, or PRNI, the goal of the activity was safe, reliable maritime transport services in the Pacific that connect people to markets and services. And the long-term outcomes is for economic development that is supported through maritime transport of people and goods, and also safer Pacific maritime transport that supports the well-being of all people and protects the environment. So that's very high level. And then getting down to the nitty-gritty, there were 5 outputs as they're shown here. And of interest for today's presentation is really the mitigation measures output, which relates to improving nautical charts, primarily through new surveys, but also incorporating data that may already exist, but not necessarily being made available to hydrographic offices, and then the importance of getting data release mechanisms in place to make that data available. So just some stats to show what's been achieved over the life cycle of the project, and maybe just a highlighting there that a total of just over 2,200 square kilometres of the seabed has been mapped, and in some areas this has been for the very first time. And also out from this, the main thrust is obviously producing and updating nautical products to improve safe navigation in the area. So a bunch of brand new ENCs, electronic navigational charts, have been produced, and by the end of the project there should be around about 19 new ENCs and a number of new paper charts as well. So just to give you some context of which part of the globe we're talking about, the light area is New Zealand's area of charting responsibility, and we are the primary charting authority for 5 Pacific islands. So our area stretches from up in the Pacific and the Cook Islands all the way down to the Ross Sea and the Antarctica. And in particular, we also look after Tonga, produce and maintain the charts. So Kim mentioned the risk assessment tool. This was developed and used for Tonga and the Cook Islands in the first instance, and this is the method that we use to identify areas for priority survey. And so using vessel traffic information, you see the lines there that shows where the ships are actually traveling. And in this particular instance, it's the domestic ferries between the islands. And the fathoms chart that was being used, that's seen there as well, indicating a shallow reef. When you do the survey, we find that that reef is actually 1,000 meters away from where it's actually located. So using a combination of, in this particular instance, bathymetric LiDAR and multibeam, then we're able to determine at least depth over that reef, but also delineate it, possibly for the first time. So taking a multi-sensor approach, the initial planning was conducted on, in some cases, charts of undetermined datums and in fathoms. So we knew that we had a little bit of work to do in terms of reviewing the survey extents as we stepped through the project. So first up was the use of satellite-derived bathymetry, and this was collected throughout the Kingdom of Tonga, along with some of the other 5 countries that we're responsible for, and this really shows the mislocation of the islands in terms of the bathymetry. So this then led us on to realigning the chart and then realigning our plans and reviewing where we then need to focus our efforts when we start capturing the airborne laser bathymetry. So in this particular instance, the laser bathymetry, it was a shallow channel system, and we trimmed it off down to around about the 20-meter contour mark. So similar to the SDB, once we had the LiDAR captured and identified areas, we were then able to review where we want to collect the multi-beam echo sounder data. So in this particular project, the multi-beam was mounted on a mothership, but also a USV, the DRIX, and they were working in tandem, collecting data. So what we then be able to produce then out of that is a brand new chart on WGS84 rather than undetermined datum, and with depths in meters. So here's the chart laid over all of the data. So a combination of the bathymetric LiDAR, which also collected the data over the islands. So there's quite an extensive data set that has been delivered to Tonga. So it's not just purely bathymetry. There is other data sets there that are of use to Tonga and other agencies. So just really to look at, I wanted to show some other examples of more remote locations that were covered by this project. And I had a struggle trying to limit the number of places and images I show, because there's such a range and really some fantastic imagery to show. So this reef is some 340 kilometers north of the main group of Tongan islands. And what I'm focusing on here is the Kudakau Reef, circled there in the red and shown on the nautical chart at maybe a scale of maybe 1 to 3.5 million, just as a submerged rock. Whereas on the satellite-derived bathymetry, then we're able to delineate a position and also a depth. In this instance, from the SDB, there is a depth of 0.6 meters. So this really helps to support identifying these features and helping nations understand the reefs that are in their areas. So that's gone pretty quick. So this is another location, another remote reef, Durham Shoal, and again just showing the satellite imagery and then the derived bathymetry that's been extracted from it. And again, comparing it to the chart, then there's a chart charting depth there about 14.3 meters, where the SDB is showing around about 11.4. Now, this is one I quite like in particular. So just north of the main island, Tongatapu in Tonga, there is a group of volcanic islands. And on the chart there, it notes volcanic activity from 2015. And if we zoom in, this is the chart representation of those two islands. But then following the satellite imagery, we're actually seeing the feature that's joined those two islands together. And that's grown over a period of time. I think the eruption was December 2014 through to January 2015. So quite a substantial infill and new land feature. And then looking at the satellite-derived bathymetry, how that has now defined the outside of that feature. So this is an example here then of a very remote location, a brand new feature, and being able to map it for the first time. So all of the data that's been collected through Prni has now been made put up onto the IHO DCDB and is discoverable. It was a relatively recent addition over the last month or so. So we're obviously very, very pleased that we're able to facilitate that and get that put forward. And all of the data that has been collected through Prni has been provided through to the South and West Pacific Data Centre for inclusion into the model. So for us in New Zealand, making data freely available is common practice, and we have an open data policy. So making data freely available is critical to really the ongoing success and use of such mapping campaigns. So it's really, really important then to consider any such campaigns. What is the data release mechanism that's needed to be considered when to make this data available is being collected for a particular purpose, but can be used for so many other things. So Prni also looked at other areas. So we covered with Prni Tonga, the Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau, and Samoa. And this example here is of Beveridge Reef, and this is located some 240 kilometers southeast of Niue, the rock, and again charted at a scale of something like 1 to 3.5 million. So very small scale, and the chart there says it's reported to lie 3 miles out of location. So what we're able to then do is, with the satellite-derived bathymetry and then finally the airborne laser bathymetry, is actually provide the detail of that reef that shows the coral heads within the lagoon area there, but also the entrance going into the reef. And this has now worked its way onto a brand new chart and is there then to support the Niue government in protecting that area. There is a recently established marine protection area around the reef, and almost half of Niue's EEZ is a marine protected area. So again, it's being collected for safe navigation, but the data quality, the resolution, and what can be collected is of use for other purposes. And as I said, there was a number of features that I really wanted to show you. So again, just some examples of features that have been mapped, more than likely for the first time, really expanding on knowledge and understanding of what's going on below the surface. And here we've got an example of gravity-fed sediment draining from the edge of a fringing reef, where the sand is moving down the slope into the basement. So again, this is off Tonga, one of the middle islands and groups, and with the bathymetric LiDAR, high resolution aerial imagery was captured at the same time. And other features, again, just off the northern tip of the same island, showing some drowned reef structures and a number of scouring in the sediments between some of the passages between those reefs. And coming towards the end here, so in one of the other island areas where it was on charts and undetermined datums, and along the shipping routes, there are a number of uncharted reefs. So the reefs rising here from depths around 275 meters to a least depth of about 26 meters, and other ones rising from about 300 to 40 meters. So although not necessarily a hazard to surface navigation, delineating reefs to be able to assist in what ecosystems are living on these features. And then finally, just the main purpose, obviously, for hydrographic office is picking up significant navigation hazards. So here, within the Hefefa group of islands, the larger scale chart at the time showed depths around about 22 and 35 fathoms. So that's around about 64 meters in those locations, where actually what we're discovering through the combination of these data sets, we're getting least depths of 6.3 and 5.2. So because we're now getting full seafloor coverage with this technology, we're able to pick up hazards and actually delineate them with great resolution. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been quite a journey and learning for us in this technology and the approach that we've taken, using the combination of technologies and how we've been able to adjust the work of subsequent data capture campaigns to be able to gain efficiencies and economies in where we target the effort and target our survey activities. Because as you're well aware, putting a plane, putting a boat into some of these very remote locations is an expensive business, and we wanted to make sure that we are collecting the data efficiently and effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, do you have any question? There's no question. Excellent work. Thank you. We have one more. This is a bonus presentation. We just received it yesterday, and we'll play this. I hope this one works.
Thank you, Map the Gaps Symposium and the JEBCO community. My name is Nicole Trenholm, and I am the principal investigator of Go Marie. Go Marie is the Glacier Oceans Mapping and Research Interdisciplinary Effort. This is a decadal mission. It is led by the Ocean Research Project, a nonprofit organization based out of Annapolis, Maryland in the United States. This is a project intended to conduct mapping and interdisciplinary research across the glaciated coastline of the Arctic during the ocean decade. The Go Marie project for 2022 is approved by the Ocean Frontier Mapping Program, the Seabed 2030 Nippon Foundation. Partners include Map the Gaps, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, University of Hull, University of Maine, Bowdoin College, and the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences. Our advisory is coming from NASA. It's coming from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and also the Goddard Space Flight Center's Ocean Ecology Laboratory. Our flagship, the research vessel and expedition schooner, Marie Tharp, will soon be commissioned and for her maiden voyage and for ocean research projects return to mapping activities in Greenland. That's right, in the summer of 2022, the Marie Tharp and our team will return to Greenland, to southwest Greenland, where we are going to very targeted locations to address some major objectives relative to the need for geophysical observations to better understand changes in Earth system processes in a warming Arctic and subarctic region. We are foremost looking at the drivers, these physical processes, and the ecosystem impacts are changing relative to glacier meltwater discharge and the increase of that discharge. So we're going to be characterizing from the seabed, from the water column to the sea surface with various technology. We'll be using both acoustic, optical, and satellite remote sensing data to observe the total suspended particulate matter that is coming off of these melting glaciers over the season. We're actually going to be using a multi-beam sonar for multiple purposes during this expedition. Now, our sponsor, R2 Sonic, that's providing us a Series 2026 that maps to 800 meters, is what we're going to be using for our dedicated mapping days during the Go Marie mission from mid-July to mid-August for about 5,000 kilometers and over about half a dozen uncharted glacial fjords. Fjords that are gaps in the JEBCO-IBCAL International Bathymetric Arctic Ocean Grid are missing integral information, integral topographic subterranean information relative to the Greenland bed machine model. Now, this model is used by many climate scientists and cryosphere scientists that are projecting mass ice loss changes in the future, as well as sea level rise rate and fresh water runoff volumes. So southwest Greenland is where these gaps are in the seabed that we need to go and collect to be able to improve our projections of how glacier meltwater discharge and deglaciation is going to impact the coastal marine ecosystem. The multibeam sonar will also be collecting that water column backscatter data, that acoustic information that R2 Sonic coins as TruePix. And we're going to be able to use that to derive a total suspended particulate concentration footprint, if you will. And so we're going to be utilizing that technology and testing its application for our interdisciplinary research questions. We'll be acquiring water samples as well when we do certain CTD casts. We'll be doing conductivity, temperature, depth profiles of the water column, mainly to get the sound velocity data to help correct for refraction in the water column for multi-beam steering corrections. And so we'll collect some water samples so that we can run some tests within the ship lab as well as back with our partner universities to determine more characteristics of the constituents in the water, particulate and dissolved, the geochemistry, the optical properties. And we'll have flow-through sensors as well on board that will be able to pick up some of this near-surface information, acoustic current information, as well as particulate matter size that will allow us to cross-reference what some overpassing satellite remote sensing derived information will be able to tell us, such as total suspended particulate matter or total suspended sediment coming off these glaciers, as well as chlorophyll concentration over the summer and how that's changing. So we'll be able to have multiple ways of validating or verifying some of these satellite data products, as well as truly kind of understanding the physical processes going on in these different glacier fjords and their different stages. So on board, we're going to be having a hydrographer from coordinated by Map the Gaps. Well, we're looking at having someone who's going to be able to have some experience, of course, with R2Sonic and QPS hydrographic systems software, and we're excited about that. This person is going to really allow us to ensure that we have IHO certified quality data acquisition as we move about. And we are going to also be having various collaborators from the University of Hull, as well as other graduate students that are going to be participating in this effort. Now, the Ocean Research Project sails for science, education, and exploration. We intend to decarbonize ocean discovery and conduct research that brings more oceanographers and technicians together in order to meet the observations that we need to acquire for the Sustainable Development Goals to be met of the United Nations program. The Ocean Research Project is dedicated to becoming a bathymetric data node during the ocean decade with collaborators and partners as we move about the uncharted glaciated coastline of the Arctic. We're incredibly excited to get started and get back up to Greenland and get into these fjords and start collecting this very precious, important information to share with everyone. Thank you very much. And please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions and further discussion. Thank you.
Okay. And I think that concludes our session for today. Please come back in 50 minutes for the next technology innovation session. If there's any question, it's like a last chance for you to say so. Okay. Well, thanks, Jamie. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again later. Thank you, and thank you all to the speakers and to all who attend. Thank you.